If you're into Spanish crime dramas, Gangs of Galicia has arrived on Netflix. But does it deserve to be on your watch list? A lawyer arrives in the small town of Cambados with the intention of settling accounts with her past. So this is a pretty straightforward story. We have Ana, a lawyer from Madrid, who after a family tragedy decides to get answers to her past by moving to this small seaside town of Cambados. The town, it is run by drug traffickers, and Ana finds herself intertwined in their business and then has to decide her next move. Now this is 7 episodes, and while the first one is about an hour, the majority fall within the 40-ish minute time range. The drama for the series is high, and it involves a ton of family dynamics. Not only do we watch Ana and her interactions with her family, but then we are witness to the large extended family of the Padins, the drug traffickers who live within the town. Now they're well known, and their business is not really a secret, but because of their wealth and power, they operate fairly easily, until this national investigation begins to form. And there's also another family that's right in the middle of all of this. A grandmother, her daughter, and granddaughter who live in the town, and they run a local bar and cafe. Each of the characters in this show are intertwined with others, leading to complex and even harried situations. And this is where the story lingers the longest, within the family dynamic realm. There's certainly enough content to create the show around this, but the narrative, it can be bogged down thanks to so many familial ties. And some of the relationships, they're barely touched upon, making certain aspects unnecessary for the plot. Like there's a young character who is Daniel, the lead character's nephew. We get to see a few interactions involving his parents, especially the strain between the mom and the dad, and then their relationship with the rest of the Padin family. Now the boy is integral to portions of the storyline. His parents, though, aren't. They just end up being ill-defined extras who bicker in the background. Now, the interwoven complexities of the large family make for several story complications that help to keep the pace flowing, but it also runs up against creating too many diversions that pull us in different directions. The crime aspect works, but it's not novel or unique. I mean, drug trafficking and smuggling, it's kind of blah when it comes to intrigue. And because there's not a ton of action within this, the drama has to be all the more engaging. Now, thankfully, some of it is just that. But I think the story progression, it is pretty obvious for this. The decisions the characters make in the first episode, they basically spell out the trajectory for the rest of the show, at least with the main plot. But the story also chooses to create large focus on the Padin family and their smuggling. Again, this can be interesting, but it becomes the focal point for so much of the storytelling, which then puts Ana's quest on the back burner. There's still relevance and some connectedness to all the arcs, but when we start with a story that focuses on a character trying to gain information, and then the story shifts to the activities of drug traffickers, it can come across like the writers lost the plot a bit. There are also several time jumps within the show, with the majority of them taking place in the first episode. Now we get on-screen notices of the time, so it's not confusing, but it does feel very clunky and disjointed, especially in the beginning. And I know the show is using this to get us to more interesting events that can only take place once some time has passed, but it also feels like we're missing big chunks of context in Ana's life. That's because we are. And I don't think these jumps completely ruin the experience, but leapfrogging ahead multiple times can be a little distracting while also harming the connection to the story. Now, while Ana and Daniel have good chemistry together, some of the other characters within the limited series, they come across as bumps on logs, even though they're intended to be large foreboding presences. Take the Padin dad. He's one of these. He's painted as this ruthless criminal who is untrusting and scheming. And we also get to see how many characters actually show him deference. But when he's on screen, nothing about his persona creates a scary or menacing presence. And then on the other side of the law, there are a few officers who are meant to convey intimidating legal power and influence. But other than threatening witnesses or informants, they too come across as impotent when it comes to coercion. And that's quite the bummer too, because as things begin to reach their breaking point and they come to a head, the potential showdown between cops and bad guys, it could be explosive intense. But the lack of emotion and exuberance from the writing and the acting, it just simply makes the scenes come and go without much notice. And I know I've been listing what seems like nothing but negatives for the series. There are some parts throughout this that make it entertaining despite the shortcomings. As rote and predictable as it was, I did find myself rooting for certain relationships, regardless of plausibility. And I think that came down to the charm that was shared between characters. The conflicted feelings worked to make this compelling as a character drama, even if the crime aspect and the cloak and dagger portions, they weren't all that stellar. So all in all, Gangs of Galicia is a mixed bag of enjoyment. The lead characters work well together to craft a strained and troubled relationship that's also hesitantly sweet, but the predictability and unoriginality of the story greatly reduce the overall engagement and intrigue, with multiple familial complications contributing more distraction than cohesiveness. There is sex, some nudity, a ton of profanity, and a bunch of violence. I give Gangs of Galicia 2.5 out of 5 couches. So have you watched any good crime dramas lately? I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.